Pack it up, boys and girls, the H3 pack for Payday 2 is no longer the best $5 you can spend on the heisting genre. Okay, but seriously, entry point Freelancer's sCut is something a bit special. You might remember earlier this year I covered Entry Point, a Roblox game with distinct elements of Payday and Hitman, creating this stealth-focused experience that was as much an immersive sim as it was a heisting game. This right here is a remake in progress of the first game, currently in paid early access, with 3 of the original 8 story missions rebuilt and expanded upon from the ground up, in addition to 3 fully endorsed community-made creations to flesh out a current roster of 6 highly replayable heists, break-ins, and assassinations. As far as I can tell, it's simply a buy-to-play game, which seems relatively rare for this platform. But you obviously have to ask, why pick this up when you can just play the original for free? Well, if you enjoyed the complex, subterfuge-centered mechanics of the first entry point, you'll adore the additional depth of Freelancer's sCut, totally revamping progression, skills, and RPG mechanics, redesigning heists, as well as expanding both our arsenal of tools and hidden tricks up our sleeve. Fair warning, this game is brutally difficult at times, with an incredibly steep learning curve that still requires an impressive knowledge base to approach. But once you start to get a handle on it, it can be one of the most satisfying stealth experiences in gaming in my opinion, well worth the cost of admission, and undoubtedly one to keep an eye on as it continues to receive major updates. That being said, let's dive into the expanded world of Entry Point, Freelancer's sCut, another game that's just enough Payday to catch my eye. Fortunately, after splurging on Notoriety's DLCs, I still had the pocket change required to make this purchase, definitive proof I haven't been getting fleeced out of my hard-earned Robux. Immediately after spending my money, the main menu told me I should probably attempt the completely free tutorial mode called the Operator's Demo, something anyone can try out to get a feel for exactly what Freelancer's sCut is all about, and one of the best advertisements the game could possibly hope for. I love this demo idea as a clever 3-mission tutorial which showcases the mechanical advancements you can expect from the remastered version across stealth, hacking, and loud focus missions. The only problem is, as it removes the progressive skill system and RPG specialization elements of the game, you will be chasing the white whale of being able to pull off most of this cool stuff for the first several hours of gameplay once back on the full version. Immediately though, you should be able to notice a fundamental difference in how the UI and player character is displayed. We've moved from having a third-person model on screen at all times, which you might remember really got on my nerves, to instead granting you access to on-demand third-person gameplay. You can switch to and from this perspective to first person for aiming at the push of a button, opening up a wealth of possibilities and giving the game a genuinely unique feel. I think it's bloody brilliant, especially for a game in this sort of social stealth genre, allowing you to gain a vision advantage over security, move dynamically to stay out of sight, and actually see your disguise at all times. It's the first of many features that showcase a very driven and purposeful vision for the game, as well as a sense of polish you wouldn't necessarily anticipate out of a Roblox experience. This slicker and, most importantly, clearer presentation style pervades just about every aspect. Animations have been improved and added where they were previously missing, the HUD is more in keeping with the game's aesthetic, and the overall game feel is a lot weightier and more purposeful. That being said, the first of the tutorial mini-missions is King Street, an assassination job designed to get you more acquainted with stealth. This means anything ranging from searching out keycards within the heist itself, pickpocketing, or silently taking out guards and drawing their attention by doing illegal acts such as destroying their cameras. Rather than a simple alert or radio pager system, the entire game is built around a more nuanced suspicion mechanic, with certain acts such as messing with the power supply or shooting audibly in the vicinity of enemies, placing the guards on a higher level of alertness. You're still somewhat limited by the number of security guards you can take out without alerting a police response, however this feels much more organic than what you might be used to. With guards growing increasingly aware of your presence, the more chaos you cause on a mission-to-mission basis, making any disguise you might be wearing less effective and increasing the rate at which you're detected. There is a countermeasure for that in the form of radioing in an all clear to central command though, again leaning into the strong role-playing aspect of the game, as only operatives with certain skills can pull that off. Of course, here in the tutorial we have everything unlocked to try out, which did lull me into believing I could do a hell of a lot more when back in the full game at level 1. Yet again, beyond these more Payday-adjacent mechanics, Entry Point takes some of its other stealth cues from the Hitman series, with disguises returning, but functioning in a slightly different way. Now they're much more purposefully placed, allowing the level design to actively dictate the pace and mechanical expertise it wants you to showcase. I think it's a bit of a shame that we can't tactically take out guards and strip their attire Hitman style, but because that's no longer an option, locating a disguise rack on a heist becomes a key driver of difficulty you'll need to surmount, adding much more jeopardy to the stealth gameplay before you manage to do so. Additionally, this starter mission tutorializes some of the deeper movement options we're going to have at our disposal, able to jump and climb on objects to reach high ground that would otherwise be insurmountable. Baiting remains a key strategy, using things like power boxes to drag patrols out of position, enabling me to take out the target and complete this initial heist. My first impression is a positive one, a feeling that only grows with my attempts at the next hacking-focused mission, Bathurst Street, although it also gave me an early taste of the potential frustrations this game can and will throw your way. What's impressive though is just how much confidence it puts in the player to traverse and find their own solutions to problems they're met with. Its fairly discreet sound system means doing something as brash as shooting out a window and scaling the side of a building isn't out of the question. Neither is moving a dumpster out the way to open a hidden side entrance to bypass the front of the building, something that I again took for granted as a result of the tutorial but would lose access to once in the full version. Back onto the actual objective of this one, we need to compromise a couple of laptop PCs around what's a surprisingly large office complex. This can either be done the old-fashioned way by finding the laptop directly, or hacking to the building's Wi-Fi via a compromised network node. This opens up a series of hacking options, ranging from turning off or gaining control over the camera system, all the way up to remotely completing the hack, saving me from needing to risk a wander through this guarded office. The more complicated and risky the hack, the more it'll drain you of resources or require greater specialization, risking elevated suspicion or instant detection in the process. This is a mechanic with genuinely mind-blowing scope, although once again, can be just as easily missed if you don't specialize for it in Freelancer's sCut. The other thing I started to notice was just how inexplicable some of the fail states I was hitting seemed to be. Turns out turning the power off twice can set off the alarm, as can searching for the decryption key while security is already on high alert. At the time, I was less familiar with the suspicion system and what exactly progressed it, but let me tell you, this was just the first of a few genuinely fist-clenching moments I'd run into. Anyway, onto Dover Court Road, the loud tutorial, another area that has undoubtedly been tightened up in this version of the game. Many of the issues I've had playing these FPSs in Roblox seem to have been addressed. Enemy AI is aggressive and will hunt down the player, although is not beyond taking a little cover from time to time. They'll also respond appropriately to being shot in a reasonable time, with a slightly more fitting ragdoll than I remember from Notoriety or the original entry point. At the same time, it all still feels a little familiar, for better or for worse. It's a little more punchy and tactical, but the limitations of shooters built in Roblox remain. What I will say though is, while stealth is where the game excels, by leaning into its more arcadey roots, allowing to regenerate a portion of health damage by quickly getting behind cover, the limitations of loud gunplay are felt less prominently. Also, the way C4 functions will always impress me, enabling you to blast through solid surfaces to open up new routes around an objective. That being said, that's all 3 tutorials, as finished as I care for them to be. Time to face the full game. Loading back up the paid version and ignoring the difficulty warning this time, character creation is familiar to anyone who played the original, although at least codename Skippy bothered to face me this time. You can also modify your suit, hairstyle and facial hair, enabling me to accidentally create this Almir Listo with a mohawk abomination who will be representing me from here on out. Now out of the way, I don't appear to be able to turn whilst in my safe house, which makes navigating a little bit challenging, although knowing me, that's user error and nothing to do with the game. Fortunately, we can navigate to most things through the menus directly, meaning my inability to swivel isn't the end of the world. We can of course dive directly into a mission, but as always, I want to see what my starting 10k can buy me in terms of build progression. This is split across a number of interconnected systems that will take a little getting used to. We have skills training, the classical stealth skill web, which resembles the original entry point system, loud skills, a more traditional tiered tree, which you can put points into at a more tightly controlled rate, as well as a menu I wouldn't find until much later on, allowing you to spend credibility, a secondary currency tied to completing mission challenges, which can be used to further account progression as well as purchase access to additional tools, weapons and modifications. What's unique about this is how all leveling systems are tied together. You level up your account by spending cash, unlocking skill points to invest in your specialized stealth training, and at a slower rate, points to spend on loud skills, meaning you don't need to compromise your stealth setup to function better in loud. The level of your count is actually capped based on the amount of credibility you've spent, meaning you need to keep completing challenges to further progress, making progression feel quite purposeful and built into its replayability, allowing a roster of just 3 official and 3 community created missions to go a lot further than you might suspect. The only problem lies in the fact that most of the fun mechanics I've just had tutorialized for me over the previous hour are locked behind hours of level grinding without access to these more innovative tools. More on that shortly. For now, let's take a look at these specializations functioning as starting points in the core skill web. Intimidation is a social stealth-focused tool, granting you new dialogue options within the game's conversation system. You heard me right, Freelancer's sCut allows you to go beyond the already awesome interrogation mechanic from the original entry point and actually bluff or intimidate key personnel into giving away heist information. A genuinely brilliant concept that adds a ton of heist and build variety to the game almost effortlessly. Lock Artist buffs your lockpicking ability and will allow you to skip through certain objective lock safes. Advanced Protocols is the hacking mode, opening up more options whenever plugged into a hacking tool. Electrical Engineering grants access to the Rewire tool, enabling you to disarm certain alarms, enter otherwise locked doors, or turn off the power without suspicion, while Social Engineering gives you even more options in conversations, allowing you to avoid instant detection, gain an effective disguise in certain areas, and smooth talk your way into a lower suspicion level. This is where I want to start, as I'm truly intrigued by the potential of speech in this sort of game. Finally, before jumping back into the heist, I should also mention the game's unique loadout and inventory system. As standard, you have 6 slots to carry things on your person, in addition to the ability to bring along medium or large sized bags filled with additional equipment. Different items take up differing amounts of space, whilst the heavier you're armed, armoured or weighed down by items, the easier you will be to spot, breaking stealth. It's fairly self-explanatory and a surprisingly fun equation to juggle, not unlike concealment in Payday 2. The other variable in this equation is cost, with certain tools or weapons costing more to bring along, denting your final take and rewarding risk-taking or highly optimised builds. I no longer believe you're charged for your loadout upon mission restart, which suits the game's trial and error style a little more, but loadout cost is still something to keep in mind. Anyway, the Financier is the first chronological mission we can take on, the perfect fusion of that Payday and Hitman love child you can expect from this game. It's a potential assassination mission that's also about nicking a hard drive. One thing I need to note down whilst trespassing in the apartment next door is just how well designed the lockpicking system is. Most core interactions have animations and their time requirements feel a lot less egregious, but most crucially, this over-the-shoulder perspective actually creates some fairly unique gameplay moments as you glance nervously from side to side to make sure no one's in earshot. A perfect example of using the third-person perspective to its advantage, and a massive improvement from the pure interaction circle system I moaned about in the last video. From there, I was able to access the security room, take down cams and locate a disguise, opening up the rest of the heist, giving me loads of opportunity to get lost. You see, all these cool things I could do in the tutorial mode are now off limits, something that feels quite jarring once in a mission. I was able to convince Ross to follow me into this bedroom via the speech system, although one of the more observant guards managed to see through my disguise and throw the whole stealth thing into disarray. With just a pistol in my arsenal, the gunplay wasn't exactly thrilling on recruit difficulty. Weapons can't be picked up directly from fallen cops as they could be in the original. Instead, they drop specific ammo types for whatever weapons you choose to bring, making the decision on what to carry into a heist much more important, which I totally get. Again, I do think this is a gameplay trade-off, with the more sandboxy elements of the original being sacrificed to provide a more consistent and controlled challenge. One thing that has returned from entry point though is the importance of scavenging across the entire playspace. Anything from tools to ammo boxes and medkits can be found stashed in logical locations, keeping you locked and loaded even if you intended to stealth originally. As mentioned earlier, auto-replenishing health makes loud gameplay a little less punishing, and although the SWATs are undoubtedly more competent, they're still quite flimsy, with shield-wielding Aegis having destructible glass panels like their cousins from Payday 3. As a result, I was able to clear this first heist, although not without some struggle. The Deposit is up next, a very standard multi-story bank heist and one of the more memorable experiences from the first game. Once you find your way into the basement here and grab a security uniform, this heist really opens up. Although without the skill that allows me to pickpocket people, I was forced to go loud after my brazen takedown of bank staff was witnessed in plain sight. And this really speaks to one of the core problems I ran into whilst playing the game, and something that would repeat across all the storyline missions. In some ways, stealth feels locked off behind one of two things. An extreme font of knowledge and game mechanics you're unlikely to pick up in your first 2 or 3 hours with the game, or skills you don't have the prerequisite points to use. A more experienced player would likely know there are alternate sources for the vault keycard I seek, meaning they wouldn't need to take down this sieve in public. A higher level player might be able to threaten or pickpocket the keycard and avoid this risk altogether. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, I just worry players less committed to seeing everything this game has to offer than myself might be inclined to bounce off it rather than gain those prerequisites to have more fun with the game. Anyway, slight moan out of the way, I really don't mind the steep learning curve. I just ran into this repeat scenario where I'd spent 10 minutes fumbling around in stealth, taking things slow, before being faced with the most anticlimactic regular difficulty shootout you can imagine, as you can see here, completing the classic thermite holdout from the original. That in mind, I'm going to skip across to my later attempts at these heists with a more complete build and understanding of stealth mechanics, because in my opinion, that's where you'll start to re-unearth the innovative game that made itself apparent within the demo. For example, on the Financier, the first mission I slot my way through, when entering with a more fully formed build and understanding of what this heist is asking of you, you'll find a totally different experience on the other end. Once you learn where the camera room's located, you can wipe them off the map and grab a disguise within the first 30 seconds of spawning in. Then, with a solid understanding of how the noise system works, feel free to shoot the lock off this door, opening a totally new way to traverse the map with the climber skill equipped, allowing you to shuffle up this pipe and avoid all that messing around with keycards. After turning off the power boxes, which you can also do in multiple ways, just smashing them with the brute strength skill, or even ignoring them and just disarming the alarm from within, you're inside and ready to deal with Ryan Ross. On harder difficulties, he'll be shadowed by the head of security, meaning we can give her a call using some assets located in that room we fired our way into earlier to feign blackmail and get her away from the boss, who we're then free to interrogate into handing over effectively everything we'll need to complete the heist before pacifying him for later. With all the codes at our disposal, it's just a case of heading over to the safe, grabbing the hard drive, and decrypting it at a laptop for everything we need to escape with Ryan in tow, moving him back down the staircase, fireman's carry style, for a sub 5-minute completion. Sounds easy, right? Well, it really isn't. There are so many things that can go wrong, and will go wrong throughout the learning process. What I have no issue with is the core and logical challenges you'll face. Getting spotted shimmying up a pipe is probably worth calling in, and certain guards being better at seeing through your disguise, or the bodyguard rapidly calling in a point of no return search if Ross is dealt with while she's still alive, are all excellent examples of organic difficulty in action. Unfortunately, for all these moments of nodding acceptance at failure, you will also face infuriating ones when a guard turns inexplicably and spots you entering a space considered trespassing, or when the inconsistency of mechanics like hostage taking or noise investigation come home to roost. I'd like to see the dialogue and disguise system tie into making these particularly rage-inducing failures feel a little less finite at times. I was also frustrated by the feeling I was being cut off from certain objectives without hyper-specific builds. Take this moment on a heist I'll be going in depth on shortly, when the F key being both the follow command and takedown button came to haunt me, losing my only skillless way to enter the control room by the vault and effectively locking me out of a stealth clearance as far as I'm aware. You see, these doors can be opened with high enough social engineering or a very strong drill. But without these hyper-specific solutions, if you lose this guard, your stealth run is effectively done. Totally user error on my part, but you can hopefully see how this would be an easy cock-up to make. Skill issue moan out the way, just understand this is a difficult, uncompromising game at times. The wiki is a godsend, but even with it, a certain amount of patience is required to enjoy what's an unexpectedly hardcore experience if you were to be reductive about its Roblox coat of paint. Anyway, whilst I've been frustrated at times with these immersive sim elements, I've also been just as impressed by the literal and figurative doors they open up. You see, going back to the Financier, a heist you're hopefully familiar with now, the way I just showcased is just one of many approaches you can take depending on your build, playstyle, and ingenuity. You see, if speed is less your focus and you decide climbing up poles isn't the professional's way, you can instead grab 2 points of lockpicking, allowing you to open up this safe in the security room containing the elevator keycard. With that in hand, suddenly you can make your way upstairs without ever leaving the building, allowing you to totally circumvent the power box objective. Then, instead of looking to take the target hostage, why not search around his apartment first, finding the codes you need to unlock the safe and use the laptop silently. Player choice is the aim of the game, and 9 times out of 10 there will be another way around the problem if you consider all options. The only issue is, I found that was often hidden behind a dozen resets. So much trial and error is involved that can lead to moments of immense satisfaction to combat the equally immense frustration at times. Also, if you were wondering if these social skills are any good, look no further than this moment, where I use it to move Ross out the way of his guards to deal with him more discreetly, before again using that lift I unlocked to carry his body to the escape with infinitely less risk of getting spotted. I can't stress enough just how many branching possibilities you have in stealth. You can use speech to disable the alarms, pickpocket a keycard, or even something like the lift I just mentioned can be accessed in multiple ways, such as hacking it active or rewiring it with enough skills in that specialization. Hacking in particular is incredibly deep and can be used to mark targets, remotely open doors, or even complete entire objectives from the comfort of a Wi-Fi node. This adds a wealth of replayability, especially with how difficulty scales, something I'll touch on more shortly. Moving on to the third reimagined official experience coming over from Entry Point, Withdrawal is another bank heist that in the original I think did the most with the game's social stealth and disguise mechanics, as you had to set up a fake meeting with a supposed account holder at the bank before turning your gun on the guys you just duped. Freelancer's Cut follows a similar pattern, again with added complexity. This time we need to bluff our way into the employee areas to grab a security uniform instead of being able to steal it directly off a guard's body. The power to a few metal detectors also needs to go, and you can work out the correct color-coded box to pull the plug on through a variety of investigative options. Then, securing the meeting is a case of hacking the central computer, actually locked by an alphanumeric password that you'll either have to interrogate out of IT or locate elsewhere in the building. Once more, harder difficulties will throw you more objective curveballs, in addition to flooding the heist with more observant security, forcing you to hack an assassin's computer to free up a slot for you with the manager, a step you're not required to complete on Recruit. Before you pull off the actual heist on the vault, the sorting room will need sorting, the objective I mentioned earlier with a number of potential solutions, but only one that seems to be skill agnostic, getting this guard in the rear of the bank to use the intercom and force an entry silently. To be clear, I love this concept for an objective, it's really clever, and part of what makes it charming is how well hidden it is. However, you can also see why this is a very guide-driven game, as having the wherewithal to take this guy hostage, leave him on his feet, and try walking up to the intercom isn't something I'd take for granted. The final step is getting dressed in the VIP attire to fool the manager into walking you up to the vault, before taking out security and taking him hostage, just as we did in the original Entry Point. You can see how far the level design has come from this side by side though. There are also actually multiple different variations on this objective, most of which are much more inconvenient than just getting the manager's help, but I still appreciate they exist, especially after I accidentally smacked him over the head with my pistol the first time I made it this far in stealth. Apparently, biometric scans require the bloke doing them to be conscious to function. When your finger doesn't slip, it's easy enough to steal the loot from the cages and escape from this one, especially if you have a rewire tool to deal with the alarm on this door. The Withdrawal is probably Freelancer's Cut's most ambitious and expansive mission at the moment, and probably a decent marker for whether this is a game for you. If you get easily frustrated by awkward security room interactions and pixel-perfect detections, it might not be. As I mentioned at the start of the video, one of the reasons so much time can go into developing these core experiences is that they're now officially supplemented by community-submitted maps, which generally don't have the same level of mechanical depth, but are certainly well-designed play spaces, adding hours of additional content to the game. The Diplomat is a search and destroy style mission, moving and planting incriminating documents around a massive mansion whilst lethally dealing with the Diplomat. The sprawling layout on this one really stands out. The Brass is a classic police headquarters heist, a bit of a staple of the genre as we search to remove evidence from the lockups and backdoor their security network for future use. Finally, I have to show you a bit more of the chapel. As a stealth-only mission for most of it in a totally different setting surrounded by cultists and priests, this one is crazy. If you ask me, it's probably the most frustrating in the game as it feels a lot more linear in terms of what you need to do in order to approach it. Finding a disguise feels mandatory, and without a good way to quietly take out 3 cultists, this can be a nightmare. But the payoff once you get there is well worth it, as it turns out this lab is brewing something legitimately foul when the oil monsters start coming out of the woodwork. For sheer novelty value, this heist is unmatched. I just wish it felt a little less on rails, given its stubborn stealth requirement. And to be clear with you, all 3 of these missions I'd like to spend more time exploring fully in the future, but with the depth on offer from just the 3 core missions right now, I don't think I have the time to do them justice. Instead, I feel the need to discuss how this game keeps you coming back outside of the deep skill system, and that is undoubtedly as a result of its massive pool of RNG layouts, events, and of course its scaling difficulty system which blows most of its competitors out of the water, at least in terms of stealth difficulty. The easiest way to showcase this is back on the deposit. Here is the heist on Recruit difficulty. You can access the basement almost immediately from the centre of the bank, giving you instant access to a disguise, making everything you do upstairs accessing the vault almost a formality. Once inside, there's no need to identify where the loot will be found, and the vault sensor timer is a generous 45 seconds. Moving on to Operative, this door will now be keycard locked, meaning instead we need a bit of ingenuity, shooting through this side window to instantly gain access to the same key points of interest. The laser timer is 10 seconds tighter, but the leap in difficulty is undoubtedly manageable. Finally, on Legendary, you're hit with a wall almost immediately. With the basement entrance still locked and the glass panel to the basement now bulletproof, you no longer have a cheap and easy way to secure a disguise, making everything inside the employee areas a nightmare. Raising the difficulty also increases the odds of potentially negative RNG events, such as missing item spawns or even higher skill check requirements, meaning it is evidently aimed at only high-level players. I'm yet to qualify for that category, not yet making it past the problem the deposit on Legendary sets out. And really, that's the best way I have to describe the hardest difficulty in Stealth, as more of a puzzle game that sets problems to be solved. The gameplay flow is more so centered around working out the correct order of operations and tools we need to make that possible. It feels like it's about slotting the right shapes into the holes presented, rather than surmounting the challenge with pure mechanical skill. That sort of gameplay flow comes with its own satisfaction, don't get me wrong, but again, it will test your patience if you don't like trial and error or don't want to look up a guide. Legendary in Loud is equally tricky, with the damage you take requiring highly tactical play to avoid losing your entire regenerating pool in an instant. Cover is absolutely essential, and so too is a decent grasp of the Loud tools at your disposal, particularly with C4, which feels great as both a damage and objective orientated tool. Freelancer's Cut follows the few lethal enemies approach rather than the horde shooter gameplay Payday 2 is now synonymous with, although they can still overwhelm you at times, especially when they move tactically alongside shields and flashbangs. The overall gunplay is much more weighty than its predecessor, leaning more into a slower firing arsenal that allows for more creativity, such as incorporating a riot shield into your Loud build. I do think we unlock Loud skills a little too slowly for my liking, but that really just goes to emphasize its stealth focus. If you don't enjoy Loud in this game, you might still absolutely adore it, but I don't think the same can be said vice versa. Even so, it holds its own and is still a more than worthy goalpost on Legendary. Fortunately, these higher difficulties are locked initially, requiring you to progress through mission challenges to advance to the next level. This is the final key system I've yet to really touch on, underpinning much of the game's progression and giving its mission roster of just 6 a hell of a lot more reasons to replay them. Not only do you need the accolades received from these challenges to level up, as mentioned earlier, they're also some of the most interesting challenge concepts I've seen in a long time. They range from classic treasure hunts, speedruns, and kill challenges, all the way to ultra-hardcore pacifist or no disguise runs in stealth. Some of these will take you hours to get down, and act as the pinnacle of difficulty for the time being. They're also fully trackable in your heads-up display, making them much more accessible and driving a desire to repeat heists you might not have otherwise. It's a clever way to stretch out the content, especially as the game is built out through early access, and I can see why they've decided to tie them into progression. So after all that, a much longer video than I was expecting to make for a game with just 6 levels, half of which I didn't even go into detail on, what are my key takeaways? Well, in case you haven't picked up on it, I'm pretty enthusiastic about Freelancer's Cut. It takes many of the things that caught me off guard with the original entry point when I underestimated what could be done with a Roblox game and develops them in an even greater variety of ways. I do think the game is sometimes too black and white with what constitutes failure, but if you're prepared to push through that punishment, there's a real gem underneath. Also note that once again, voice acting is absent, which is a limitation of Roblox games I understand far better now, but remains a massive roadblock for certain elements of what sCut wants to achieve. You constantly need to be scanning subtitles for clues on what to do next, and whilst the addition of an incredibly competent minimap built into the UI helps tremendously when navigating, I can't tell you how often I missed something crucial because it disappeared off screen whilst I was focused on something else. At the same time, a number of other specific issues I had with the original have been addressed. Public and private areas are much better signposted, there's far less enemy desync, and many of the little moments of jank seem to have been ironed out. Yes, the story has been put to the side in this version of the game, but that's because dev time seems to currently be focused around building out gameplay and depth of playable content, rather than retelling the same old narrative as before. I will almost certainly revisit this game when it's closer to being in a complete state. If you're interested in doing likewise, check it out from the link below, but be sure to try out the Operator's demo first to see if it appeals before you splash the cash like me. Speaking of which, remember to check out my range of Apex Gaming PCs whilst you're poking around that description area. Thank you so much for watching. These Payday-like videos are some of my favourites to create, so your support on them is massively appreciated. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.